Mr. Speaker, my question is also to the Premier. 25 and 5 is not the only coalition lamenting the lack of progress on poverty reduction. The Housing Network of Ontario is concerned that the government's new housing strategy will not set targets for the construction of new affordable housing units, will not put in place a housing benefit to make housing more affordable for low-income Ontarians, and will not allow municipalities to require that affordable units be part of new housing developments. Why should Ontarians believe the government's housing strategy will make a difference when its poverty strategy has failed to reduce poverty?
Thank you very much, Speaker. And we work every day on this side of the House to undertake the steps that we put forward in our poverty reduction plan, which is a 5-year plan, and we are coming upon the end of 2 years into that plan. And that really differs us from the other side of the House, Speaker, because there's no plan on that side of the House. And the party opposite continues to act in a blind partisan way, attacking the poverty reduction strategy simply because it's not theirs. Speaker, I can tell you that we're very proud of the steps that we've taken on this side of the House. And again, in contrast to the other side, they voted against 6 increases to social assistance. They voted against the creation of 22,000 affordable child care spaces. They voted against stabilizing the rent bank and providing 30,000 rent supplements. They voted against raising minimum wage. They voted against taking 90,000 low-income Ontarians off the tax rolls. And they voted against the 2009 stimulus package, which invested $1.2 billion in the affordable housing.
Thank you. New question, the member from Mississauga South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question.
Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier. Toronto families have been waiting patiently for improved public transit so that the morning commute to work and school doesn't take so long, and so they can get home in the evening to enjoy dinner together. 15 years ago, these families saw previous provincial government kill Eglinton Transit. Is the Premier going to subserviently sit back and let the same thing happen under his watch?
Here.
I think the member opposite knows that we have been strong advocates for public transit and that we have made an investment in public transit that is the biggest investment in a generation, Mr. Speaker, and we want to see that plan go forward. But, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the local democratic process has taken place in the City of Toronto. Right. There is a new council and a new mayor who have been elected, and I think that the member opposite would understand that that council and that mayor have to have an opportunity to talk about what they would like to present as a go-forward position. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned if there is to be waste. There's money that's been invested in the current projects, but, Mr. Speaker, the council has to determine what it would like to present as its go-forward plan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier is from Ottawa, so he's familiar with the impact of scuttled transit plans. Families there waited and waited while governments dithered and changed their minds. Here in Toronto, we're bracing for the same, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds of Thunder Bay workers and their families are being left to twist in the wind, wondering if they'll have work. When can people in Toronto and Thunder Bay expect the Premier to show some backbone and finally get better public transit built, in particular on Eglinton Avenue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite has consistently stood in this House and advocated against the air rail link from Union Station to Pearson Airport. The member opposite's seatmate, Mr. Speaker, was the former mayor of East York. He stood in the House yesterday and he argued against local democracy, Mr. Speaker. I can remember a time when the Conservatives were in power in this province. I did a TV show with the member from Beaches, East York, and he made a very strong argument for honouring council's decisions, honouring the mayors that were duly elected. Mr. Speaker, we are very committed to public transit. We have made billions of dollars of investment. We want to see the plan go forward. But, Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to work with the elected representatives of the City of Toronto and the entire region of the GTHA.
Member for Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This question is to the Minister responsible for women's issues. Today is the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women in Canada. Violence against women remains a serious problem, from acts of hatred, such as the Montreal Massacre, to acts of coercion, such as sexual harassment and domestic abuse. New Democrats put forward a motion, actually years ago, to form an all-women's committee, an all-party committee, to form recommendations regarding domestic violence. Why won't the government overcome their partisanship to focus on this?
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I'm pleased to stand in the House and talk about women's issues on this day, a critically important day. December 6, 1989 was a day that changed our country. As a young university student, I recall, Speaker, watching the television and gaining an understanding that the act that had been committed, that was being described as a violent act, was in fact a violent misogynistic act. It was an act of violence against women. It took some time for our country to acknowledge that issue, and since that day in 1989, we worked very hard as a nation, as a province, to stand and recognize and take action. And as someone who was privileged to work with the Premier and the Minister responsible for women's issues at the time and develop our province's domestic violence action plan and now work on our sexual violence action plan, I am very, very proud of the steps that we have taken in our government to name issues and solve problems and find ways to better support women in the violence that they face in their—
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The actual fact is that violence is up across the board if you speak to people working in the field. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear anything approximating an answer to a very, very simple question. We New Democrats have had on the books for a while now a simple request. It's a simple, obvious request. And people in Ontario, women in Ontario, are absolutely horrified that this government has not acted on it. The Committee on Mental Health and Addiction, also an all-party committee, worked well. And we need the same for action to end violence against women. Are women just simply not worthy of the McGuinty government's attention?
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I would have hoped that this was a nonpartisan issue. Exactly. We work on this side of the House every day with stakeholders right across the province to find ways to invest more for women, to protect women. That's why we've invested more than $208 million each and every year to protect women from violence and support victims of abuse. Speaker, in fact, our actions have demonstrated the support that we have for women right across the province. We want women to feel safe in their homes, in their communities, in their workplaces. That's our government's goal, Speaker. That's a nonpartisan goal. That's a step that we take with the groups right across the province. But I do remember that the NDP has voted against many of those initiatives, Speaker. They haven't stood side by side with us, and we've fought for a better world for women in Ontario, Speaker. We will do that work. We have do that work. We'll continue to do that work, and I do hope that we will see the NDP's work.
New question, the member from Ottawa Centre.